Hey, I'm Rob. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for inviting me, Trey. Thanks for having me, everybody. Um, I'm a little bit nervous, honestly. I just want to name that. Hopefully, naming that will help me calm down just a little bit. I'll start off with a little bit of my AA resume, right? My sobriety date is June 15th of 2022. My in-person home group is Knuckleheads in Eugene, Oregon, and my virtual home group is this meeting. So excited to be in my home group tonight and see a lot of my friends and comrades doing this thing. Um, yeah, when Trey had reached out to me to do this, I was excited. You know, she had mentioned that I'm a secular member of AA, which is something that a lot of people don't know about, and I think is an important topic to speak on as part of my experience. For people that don't know, like secular AA is, people that come to the program with a non-religious kind of background and way of thinking about it, and often like atheists and agnostics who remain with that set of beliefs or non-beliefs while they work the program. For most people, this isn't even a question, right? Most people in AA come in and they have spiritual or religious ideas, and that lend themselves well to like a higher power, and so they don't have to think about that, right? And but for a lot of people, they come in with like religious trauma or just a non-belief sort of orientation that makes it difficult to engage with the program. And that kept me out of the rooms for a long time. I've known a lot of people that came in and out for, as a result of that. And that's super unfortunate because, obviously I think the steps suggested in the big book as a program of recovery are beneficial for everyone to recover from a lethal disease. So um, anyway, that preface being out of the way, like, I'll talk about what it was like for me, what I did, and what it's like now. I'm not going to give a super detailed, like drunk-a-log, but I will qualify myself. You know, I was an annoying kid from as early as I can remember. I was a super neurotic, anxious kid from like age 5. I had 2 alcoholic parents growing up, severely alcoholic, and they were like professionally successful people, but they were just destroying themselves with alcohol on a daily basis. Um, and so, growing up in that type of environment, I think I developed a core belief that I needed to be super attuned to the emotions and the thoughts of everyone around me. Because if I knew what people were thinking and feeling, I could behave correctly and make sure that they feel okay. And then that way, nothing bad would ever happen. Right. And that creates a super neurotic, anxious individual. And that's how I entered the world from as long as I can remember. I had all these, it resulted in really obsessive forms of thinking. I had hyper fixations all the time, things I would latch onto, ideas, pieces of content, activities. And that was my only way of like focusing my mind on something and slowing down. When I was a little kid, it was dinosaurs. Like I was fucking obsessed with dinosaurs all the time. Um, and like my parents told me that this like clay mound near my house was filled with dinosaur fossils, so I would go out there and dig in it for hours and hours, and this went on for years, right? And like anytime I would ask an annoying question, they'd be like, go dig for the dinosaur fossils, and I would go out there, and I never found any of them, right? And after all this digging, and I think that became kind of an allegory for the next like 20 years of my life. um, so anyway, as I got a little bit older with this type of personality, I was just super uncomfortable all the time. I think a lot of alcoholics have that experience of just being fundamentally uncomfortable people. And so I entered school and social situations thinking I have to say exactly the right thing. I have to engage with people exactly the right way, or they will hate me and my life will be over, or I have to behave exactly the right way, or every adult is going to be pissed at me and I won't be safe. And so this was so debilitating that like I had friends who were like fellow nerds that had similar obsessions, right? But like this made it so I couldn't engage with people. Like the idea of walking within the vicinity of like cute girls, right? It was just an intolerable experience due to anxiety. And, I'd be walking and be thinking in my mind, like, walk normal, don't walk weird, and then obsessed with walking normal, then I'm walking weird. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm walking weird. And like, this was my mind constantly. And I was managing it with like video games and different obsessive behavior because it was just a runaway train of imminent catastrophe every time I was alone with myself. And when I was about 15, I can't remember for sure if this was the first time I drank, but it was certainly the first time I drank to get drunk. And that was a revelatory experience for me. You know, I remember telling some of my friends at the time, like, we've cracked the code. This is the way to do life. Like, 2 Mad Dog 2020s and 4 shots of Jim Beam is the equation for living. Because it put all that at ease, and I could interact with people, and I could like go about my daily life as if in the way that normal people tend to do. And that started off the greatest obsession, the greatest hyperfixation of my life. And I was a heavy daily drinker for the next 15 years. And it was completely debilitating. Like, I still succeeded in school to some degree. I still maintained a career, but I was just demolishing myself with alcohol on a daily basis to try to manage my general feeling that I didn't belong in the world and was just fundamentally uncomfortable. And, as this progressed, different things happened that should have been a clue to me that, there was the end of this is not good. When I was 23, I'd ended up in the hospital for alcohol poisoning. And, they sent me home with some like diazepam to like make sure I wouldn't go into seizures because they were worried about withdrawal and stuff. And by the end of the day, I had taken the diazepam and drank whiskey on top of it. And like, I scared the shit out of myself at that moment. And years later, I read Bill's story, and he did a very similar thing with the heavy sedative and gin, right? And, the writing was on the wall, but ultimately I drank for another 10 years after that. And I tried everything. I tried every imaginable solution that I could think of. I if I read all the right books, I read like This Naked Mind and Alcohol Explained, and I was like, if I listen to the correct podcast, it's gonna blow this whole thing wide open, and I'll be able to be a normal person. And nothing worked. At one point, like, when I was in my mid-20s, my mom had died due to alcoholism, and like I got some money. And so I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave the United States, and that's going to solve this. I'm going to go to northern Thailand and go on like a yoga retreat and meditate, and it's going to be solved. And of course, like, I flew into Bangkok, quickly found Khao San Road, and like took my alcoholism on tour across 3 continents and ended up in hospitals in multiple countries. And that scared the shit out of me again. And I came home and kept drinking because I didn't have another solution. Ultimately, like, where this ends up, I think is similar for a lot of people. By the end of it, I was like in danger of failing out of grad school. All of my relationships were destroyed or falling apart. I wasn't showing up for family. And I was on summer break, and I had like locked myself in my house for multiple months. And I was only leaving to go buy handles of vodka and sometimes food, right? And like drinking from sun up to sundown, and like peeking out the blinds sometimes, and just riddled with agoraphobia and anxiety, and like unable to function. And that's when I found AA. I had flirted with the idea before, but ultimately had always left the room because I couldn't resolve the God question. And I figured, that being right about the nature of the universe was more important than being alive. And so I kept drinking. And so once I found AA, I immediately found a sponsor and started following the suggestions, about reading We Agnostics and keeping an open mind and being open to experiences, and like set myself about the task of like finding a higher power. And then I was anxiously wringing my hands about like, oh man, I got to figure out this God question. I got to figure out this higher power question, or else I'm going to drink again. And ultimately that never happened for me. Like, I do think I did an honest inquiry, and I never developed a belief in anything supernatural, that through prayer, I never received anything back, and I had to take a different approach is what I found. And I was lucky enough to kind of stumble upon some resources and some old timers in the program that had a lot of wisdom about how they handled it as people that don't believe in anything other than the material world, and I came to find out, like, for me, and I'll get into the 12 steps, is like the first 3 steps were the most difficult because I did it the way I did everything in life, which is overthink it until I can't function. But like, it was explained to me that really all you need to do with the first 3 steps is ask yourself, like, are you fucked? do you believe that you could be unfucked, right? And are you going to unfuck yourself? And, the answers to that will tell you what you need to do with the first three steps. And so, yeah, I was fucked by alcohol, like, and a lot of other things, but like my life was completely unmanageable. And this is where faith comes in, even for an atheist like me. Like, I had to have faith that things could be different and get better. Like I have these conflicting views that, oh, I'm going to outsmart this alcoholism. I'm going to read the right book and figure it out. But also the belief that like nothing would ever get better, like nothing will ever change. This is just who I am. And so I had to have faith to believe the people in the program that told me, like, if you follow this new design for living, your life will get better and it will change. And that's what allowed me to take the second step. And then the third step of, turning your life and will over to the care of God. Well, that's a more difficult question, but I can't unfuck myself. So I have to believe that I can't do this alone. And that's really in my experience, from what I did, all you need to do for the third step is just accept that, like, you need resources outside of yourself. You need help outside of yourself to solve this problem. And for me, that became like a collection of things, like that gift of desperation, AA as a whole, my sponsor, therapy, friends and family that cared about my sobriety, people that are a lot smarter than me that could give me wisdom. And I turned my life and my will over to like the design for living that those things were giving me, and by doing that, by attaching my life and my purpose to things outside of myself and searching for purpose, I think that gave me like a sense of a higher power, a sense of direction in life that served that purpose for me. And the fourth and fifth step are the same, like I wrote down everything that had ever bothered me, which turned out to be a lot more than I thought. Like it turns out, a very petty, resentful person. I wrote like a resentment about my girlfriend's dog, and it was the longest one. It was like 4 pages. It was longer than my dad's resentment, like that's what it comes down to. And, sharing that with my sponsor in the fifth step, everything that had been fucking me up for my whole life, laid it all bare, like you can have a bird's eye view of all the problems well beyond alcohol that have been making your life unmanageable, and then actually start to dissect, like, okay, here are problems that I need to solve, and set about that. And that does take work and dedication, but because you've attached yourself, in my experience, to things outside of yourself, you have people to drag you along through the process, even when you don't want to. For me, there were a lot of times I didn't want to do anything. I would lie to my sponsor and say I was too busy to talk to them, and then play video games for 13 consecutive hours. And even then, when you have people and you have accountability, they can help to drag you through the process. And that was my experience. And I'm like eternally grateful for that. The sixth and the seventh step, you see all of your character defects. I saw all my character defects. Well, probably not all of them. There's probably still some digging to do there, but you find them, and then you ask for them to be removed. And for me, it was like dishonesty. I would lie all the time because I didn't want to disappoint people. And also I didn't want people to be disappointed in me. I couldn't let people see the true version of myself, because inevitably I thought they would hate it. And so I had to create a fake reality all the time, and that was one of the biggest things, as well as just judgmentalism, like constantly being judgmental of others. And as a result, never developing real relationships. Anyway, the point being, like, for most people, they pray to have those things removed. And I went through that process too. But for me, like, I didn't think that something was going to extract those things from me necessarily, because of the different way that I was doing this whole thing. I didn't think something was going to suck them out of me. And so I engaged in the process of like, okay, these are things I actually need to do work on, in therapy and with my sponsor and through self-reflection. Let's see, 8, 9. I had some stuff to apologize for. I did a lot of damage, and one of the hardest things to accept in the amends process for me was that, a lot of the people that I wanted to apologize to, I couldn't, and I had this selfish, self-centered desire to apologize to them because I wanted to feel better, because I wanted to absolve my guilt. And ultimately, like with a lot of people, a living amends was decided was most appropriate by my sponsor and others. Like, their amends is that they get to live their life without me for the rest of their life, which ultimately is probably a good deal in a lot of those cases. And I had to set about the task of like living a better life to not do that type of harm again. uh 10, 11, and 12 for me were a continued personal inventory. I don't do this as much as I should, to be honest. Like when I'm working a strong program, this is a regular practice that I'm sending to my sponsor, but there's a lot of time where I get adrift, and I start to notice pretty quickly that my behavior deteriorates and I don't treat people as well when I'm not being kept in check by this process of evaluating, like, where am I fearful? Where am I dishonest? Do I owe apologies? Because it's very easy for me as an anxious person that's now unmedicated, right, to be engaged in a lot of fear-based activity that harms other people. And so I need that sort of scaffolding to keep my life and my behavior in check. And I find when I do it regularly, I think like a couple times a week is actually a pretty good number to shoot for in my experience. That means I'm working a pretty good program. 11 being, establishing conscious contact and maintaining conscious contact. It's difficult when prayer wasn't the thing that really did it for me, right? Meditation was always on the table, but prayer wasn't working for me. And my praying became more of like a self-reflective intention setting, like, I am going to ask other people for help today. I am going to consult my sponsor before I make decisions that might hurt people. I am going to try to connect with my community to better myself today. And that's going to, that's the conscious contact with my version of a higher power, which is the people around me and the people that are able to support me and that I'm able to support in turn. Step 12 being working with others, becoming involved in service in AA was a big part of giving me purpose early on. I'd lost sight of any direction in the world. And so having that platform to actually like try to connect with people and try to help people gave me that sense of purpose. Someone said to me early on, obviously, like, you don't have any self-esteem. Well, if you want self-esteem, do some esteemable shit. And service through AA was the platform through which to start to develop that. And I'm at this moment trying to get into sponsoring others and trying to bring other guys to the program, basically. For a long time, I didn't think I had anything to offer. And I've been told that is a thinking error and one of my character defects and one that I need to improve upon, because if I'm not doing service for others, then I'm not, I'm taking something for myself, right? Like I have been able to recover up to this point. My life has been saved, and to walk away without giving that to the next guy, to me at this point, is theft, right? I can't, that doesn't sit right with me. And I need to be better about doing that process. So that's all to say. I mean, I don't have a ton of sober time. I've been sober for a little bit over a year at this point. But my life is immeasurably better as a result of this program. And I'm really grateful for that. I finished grad school. I have my dream job. And all of my family relationships are better. I went through a breakup a little over a week ago, and it was rough. But for me now, like when things are rough, it's mostly just sad, it's heartbreaking, but it's manageable. It was an amicable experience. Both people were able to be mature and walk away from it in a certain way. And that was unimaginable to me with alcohol in the picture, right? Or before working on myself, like I would have behaved much more poorly, to say the least. And so for most days, my anxiety is gone and I feel much better. And that's really a result of this program and the people that have supported me in it. And for new people coming in, it's, don't overthink it in the way I did. That's the only advice I can give, if anybody's taking advice, I suppose, is just let the process come to you, and the mechanics of all of this will be what they need to be for you. And that's really all the faith, in my experience, that one needs to have to do it. So I think I'll leave it there. You know, thanks for inviting me to speak, Trey. Thanks everybody for having me. My name's Rob. I'm an alcoholic forever. Thanks.